Welcome back to Champions of Resilience. I'm your host, Amy Gamble, and today we're having a conversation that feels incredibly important for the world that we're living in right now. I'm joined by two bright, thoughtful 20-year-olds who represent the next generation of leaders. They're college students with a passion for technology, mental health, and creating a better way forward. What I love about this conversation is that it gives us a window into how young people are navigating stress, shaping their resilience, and using technology not just for entertainment, but as a tool to stay grounded, connected, and informed. Their voices matter, their experiences matter, and we all have something to learn from them. I wish that more older generations would talk to younger generations and vice versa more often because I think we can learn a lot from each other. So settle in, open your heart, and join us as we explore what resilience looks like through the eyes of the next generation. Welcome, Isaac and Arlo.
Thank you.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
So glad you guys would be willing to talk to me today and
Absolutely.
our guest. Awesome. We've had a lot of conversations in private about mental health and technology and all those sorts of things. And so I just want to toss it out there to you guys and ask you the question about how you think that some of the tools for mental health that are really tech focused can help support people in the younger generation and older generations as well.
We have a lot more resources now. Naturally, I wasn't alive during the time where mental health resources weren't as accessible and medicines and different prescriptions weren't as vast and there weren't as many options. It was more so lithium or Zoloft. There wasn't really many choices at a time and not many outlets. So you could see a therapist or a shrink or whatever it may be. But over time, we've had more accessibility to those resources. And with the internet and technology and everything, you can do virtual therapist appointments, virtual psychiatrists. Normally, it'll be covered by most insurances. There's resources, there's chat bots, of course, and there's hotlines, there's support groups, there's you can really find a lot of good people and a lot of good social outlets on through the internet. And that's a connection that we have now that we did not have previously. And I think one of the best ways to really reap that benefit is to recognize not to spend too much time online and recognize what's best for you,
Mhm.
as well as far as how much time you spend on a daily basis, how much you're on the screen, and normalize more so than there already is using those resources and asking for help. I think that's the best thing to do. Actually get word of mouth out there and remind people that it's okay and it's good and important. It's vital that you ask for help because you can't go through things alone. And that's, again, it's more accessible. So use that to your advantage in that regard, whatever's best for you, whether you prefer seeing a therapist or talking to a chat bot or whatever it may be, having an outlet, finding an outlet through there, especially if you don't have another option or choice at the time, can be very beneficial.
Yeah, so I just want
That's
to jump in and note a couple of key things that you said there, which I thought was really important. First of all, I think in the context of you're making reference back to back in the day when really there were only a couple of choices of medications, period, to treat mental health conditions. And yet now today, you pointed out a lot of different things. There are lots of different options, different ways of delivery, ways that people can get help. And you also said that it's up to the individual person what works for
Mhm.
them. And so, with that said, I'm just curiously, I want to get Arlo to weigh in on what his perspective is.
I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's most certainly enabled us to, we've been more able to network with the tech in our lives. Ever since we were kids, really, the whole internet has just exploded. It's gotten bigger significantly, and we now have these resources at our fingertips that we can access at any moment. We can talk to a chatbot if we really need to vent immediately. Of course, something like that long term isn't exactly healthy, but having an immediate outlet in some sense, I think Isaac really hit the point there. That is something our generation has, but on the flip side, where it becomes negative, you have content tailored towards our generation and younger generations that is extremely negative. It tailors itself in a way that chases a dopamine reaction from kids, if that
Can
makes sense.
can you give me an example of a type of content that's like that?
Shorts, TikTok,
Yeah.
anything that's 15 seconds grabs your attention and steers it in a completely different area just for 15 seconds, even if it's random, doesn't make sense. Part of the whole part of the whole random aspect of our generation is because we are exposed to short content. You see so many kids now watching things that don't make sense, saying things that don't make sense, and it's primarily because of the content that they're being fed.
How do you think that short-term dopamine hits or fixes or whatever we want to call that, how do you think that affects young people in particular?
I think directly it affects the attention span,
Uh-huh.
most directly the attention span. From what I read, I can't pull a source off the top of my head, but our attention span went from 12 seconds to 8 seconds in the past 20 years, and it's only getting worse. On top of that, we have more diagnoses of ADHD, and there's a lot more attention deficit disorders out there that it's just becoming more common. Fundamentally, you can fight fire with fire, and you can use online therapists. You can use resources that are online or different. You can implement different rewards to teach someone now, which you would have never seen in the early 90s. You wouldn't have seen in the 80s.
Yeah.
Now you can teach a child without them being exposed to a system that's going to keep them unentertained and uninterested in learning. Now you can reward them.
What's interesting to me is when I was growing up, which was many years ago, going to see a therapist or a psychiatrist was like, taboo. But nowadays, it seems like that's okay. In fact, it's encouraged. Is that the perception that you guys have?
Yeah.
And I don't want to cut you off. Am I good to go?
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Isaac.
sorry about that. But no, I've seen a lot of portrayal, especially in media. I've been watching The Sopranos recently, and like the sort of taboo idea of going to see a shrink or a therapist or to get an outlet, especially like for men, because there is that level of toxic masculinity that's established just societally. So you hear a lot of be a man, suck it up, whatever, tough it out, and people have normalized pushing aside your emotions and bottling things up. And this goes for anyone, no matter what sex or gender. That's not really relevant. It's a matter of there's a lot of suck it up, tough it out, but that only applies to a degree. You can only do so much of that. And now I can see that absolutely alongside with more resources opening up, alongside more medications, it feels like we just took such a big shift, and now you hear even schools talking about the importance of mental health. So we're getting that sort of guideline and understanding even for youth now to realize and recognize how mental and physical health go hand in hand and play a very big role together into your overall all well-being. And I think just overall we have so much more awareness of that, and because we're more openly aware, we're more openly accepting of it because we understand it and we recognize that it's not some thing to be ashamed of. It's something that everyone goes through hardships, different ways, varying different scenarios and whatnot, but everyone goes through things. And now that we've come to recognize that, we accept that. And now we have that accessibility in turn from that.
Do you think that there's still a stigma, though, around mental health? Mental
Absolutely. And
illness, I would say.
I think there always to a degree will be, but that's the same as certain problems are always going to be present. Like people being ignorant and intolerant. You're always going to have those people, or people who are uninformed or don't wish to be informed. There's a lot more people who are informed and are aware, and the shift in the number of people who are aware now is it's a large enough number to have an impact. So
Mhm.
it's definitely a big difference. There are people still there who are ignorant toward it, or whatever it may be, but it's more present.
Yeah. Arlo, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I feel as if the stigma that's associated with mental illness nowadays it's not as visible. It's definitely not as visible, and it lingers with a generation, or I shouldn't say a generation, I should say people who don't deal with their own problems, people who don't have consideration for themselves. Being someone who's been gaslit in a manner that's been verbally vicious, I'd say that it's more often than not people who just never go out to get help that they need personally. And that's where the stigma lies. They see someone else acting crazy in their own mind, and that's what they don't want to acknowledge, that they have their own issues, if that makes sense. It's a very weird thing to bring up, especially experiencing trauma in the way that I did personally.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a tough. And sometimes you're right, like some of the dialogue around mental health, it can get a little tricky because we all have varying levels of triggers and different triggers that can bring up things that can be a little sensitive. And so that's another reason why I really appreciate you guys talking today, because it's not really easy to have these kinds of conversations. And so I think you're really courageous and brave to dive into this topic. One of the things that came to my mind when we were talking about the intersects with technology and mental health and some of the options that are out there was the chatbot.
Mhm.
And actually, a little bit about a year and a half ago, I really went on an exploration of evaluating several different chatbots specifically for mental health, and then some of the relational ones that I tapped into as well, just to see what was out there and what what was available. And I actually personally ended up using one for several months, really, to help me process the grief that I was dealing with and when my mom passed away. And I found it to be really helpful. And I also found some of the limitations because of the way that the prompts work whenever you're dealing with AI and things like that. So just curious, have either one of you used a chat bot? And if so, or if not, why or why not?
Never in the regard of a direct outlet, but I have. Just toying around with OpenAI and ChatGPT and whatnot, because everyone has curiosity hearing about it, and it's so just everywhere. You can't turn the corner without seeing something about AI somewhere. Like,
Mhm.
I remember waiting in the lobby for this Zoom, and it was like workplace easier with Zoom AI.
Yeah.
And there can be a lot of benefits, but at the same time there are drawbacks and there are limitations. And part of that limitation is due to the fact that most of the AI, like ChatGPT, their open AI, is essentially, a lot of people have an understanding that it works like a supercomputer where it has its own mind, but realistically, it pulls all of its responses from its own database of information. So it only can use what it has directly at its disposal. And it also, if it's going for humanizing, it's going to go through social media and whatnot to give more of a human comfort. And with that regard of people using that, or those AI developers using social media and whatnot, and different just text across the internet to train these models, you get into some like tricky sites like Reddit or different boards. And when it gets that information, it kind of can have mixed perceptions because it doesn't have independent thought. It's just taking
Yeah.
everything and bunching this information together. And
I think
so,
I think what comes to my mind is that
Mhm,
AI, we know, hallucinates at times. So if
mhm,
you're dealing with sensitive topic and you're
mhm.
typing in some kind of a prompt. Let's say, today I'm struggling with grief and I'm really missing my mom. And then it comes back with some really off the wall kind of
Mhm.
comment. It can be really shocking. And if you're not accustomed to kind of separating between knowing that this is a chat bot and this is that you're the human, and you're going to get really mirrored back to you what you're putting into it. But that's the one thing that I noticed about it, that sometimes it does come respond with some bizarre answers, depending upon which one it is and what it is that you're putting into it,
Mhm.
because what you get out of it is only as good as what you put into it.
And there's also reports too of, I don't know about specifically therapeutic bots, but those AI models promoting self-harm or certain things when faced with certain prompts and whatnot. So there's a lot of just in between. And that's kind of why a lot of those limitations are in place to prevent any of that from being said. So there's only so far that we can go with that assistance without sacrificing the integrity and having to worry about that model going rogue from being trained by some untrustworthy post or whatever in it going off the rails.
I see.
So that kind of keeps that forces a bit of a limitation, but there still is that application of having that outlet. But long term, personally, I can't say, but I feel like um it would work even better as an outlet if in tandem with therapy or whatever works best for the person, if it's going out on walks or going to the gym, but using that in conjunction. It's the same as a medicine.
Yeah.
Like for me, my Prozac helps me get out of bed, but it doesn't get my feet out of the bed. It gives you that boost to get the extra way. And in that same regard, that outlet can be that push to get you out and up to do what you need to do to give yourself the proper care and what you need in your routine.
What are your thoughts, Arlo? Do you have any
Yeah,
perspective?
it's ever since 2019, we've been seeing rapid development of these AI models just expand in terms of what kind of references they would be using and what kind of resources from the web they can pull. They're very complicated in how they work, and they're only going to get more and more intricate and more efficient at what they do. So having models that can take from a database that, say, like the DSM, right? They can say if they can take not only information from the DSM, but take constructive elements from a dictionary, a word dictionary. You can make that, you can make it very possible not to diagnose a person, but definitely treat them. And where we might see in our generation, we might see people use it more for labeling. We might see people use it more for selfish reasons than they would actually medicinal or therapeutic. I feel as if we already rely way too much on it in school. There's a lot of there's an epidemic across the college campuses right now, actually, with people just not bothering to learn, but rather use AI to pass classes and get where they need to be.
Mhm.
And scary thought, a very terrifying thought I have is that it's going to be used eventually to just do tasks for us in important places, either in social work or psychiatry, or even if it's to diagnose someone at a physician's office. But it's not all bad because the caveat there is these machines are going to be efficient enough to actually have a conversation with and relay the information you put back into it. So if I tell it my trauma, and if I tell it the sequence of events that happened in my life, and if I tell it what my current problems are, it can do it could probably do very psychoanalytical things. It could take bits that may go all the way back into my childhood and bring it back up so we can address it and treat it. And I think that's profound. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think you're clearly speaking to there are some incredible benefits to it. I reaped a lot of benefit from a personal development standpoint and from processing grief by using one that I ended up landing on and using it more significant over time. But I do think you have to couch it with the whole idea that there's a downside to it too. Like what Isaac said, there was at one point some AI models that had encouraged self-harm and so forth, but those have been revamped and redone, and they really try to guard against that. Now, I'm not going to say that it's not a possibility that it doesn't slip through the cracks, but they've done a pretty good job about that. When you think about switching gears a little bit and thinking about college and the stressors that come along with it, and really the rapidly changing landscape that we have with the job market and so forth, what keeps you guys up at nighttime about that kind of thing?
I will say we are a little bit more fortunate because as we are more of in a tech cyber field, he's in, I believe, programming or something along the lines, and I'm doing cybersecurity. And in those fields, there's always a growing need in that job market. So personally, I'm not too worried for myself, but I do know with everything and the state of different costs of living in our country and prices going up and deflation and our dollar being worth less, there's a lot of people that there's an instability in getting a consistent job for a lot of people across the board. And even then, if you have that job, it's a matter of if you're even going to be able to scrape by to keep the lights on and have heat during the winter and eat.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think you hit on a lot of important topics around that. What are you thinking, Arlo? What keeps you up at nighttime?
Aside from the state of our inflation and economy and just the general social problems our generation's having, I feel as if we didn't really view it too good from the get-go. We were born into a world where we had access to the internet, of which had everything that our government had done bad, our government has done bad. We had been exposed to war crimes at such a young age through MP4 files, and we were the generation to see what the real world looked like. There wasn't a lens over what we saw and what we've read, and coming to terms with that has really shifted, I'd say, our whole generation's view on our outcome. If we don't, if we don't believe we have a future, then why even try?
Uh-huh.
And that's what you'll see today. There's a lot of our generation that doesn't even try because they don't think they have a future.
Where do you think the whole idea of that sort of lack of hope, where do you think that comes from? Is it coming from a lot of what you just said about the learning process of everything you learned, and that kind of makes you a little bit cynical, to say the least? Or what do you think those factors are, or at least a few of them?
I think it's a state of our education, it's a state of our government. Seeing how public schools are in rapid decline has definitely gave me the impression that our government just does not want to try when it comes to educating us. I can tell you now, we had about 200. I'm from Brooke County, so we had about 200 Chromebooks just get sold. We had to get rid of them, and there was a level of corruption that went on with the school administrators and whatnot. And these are little things that happen all across the country. You can look at the statistics and see that people are dropping out. People are going towards the homeschooling route. Not an inherently bad thing, but it goes to show that our public schools are failing. And that's how I've viewed things. It was good in elementary school. It got a little worse in middle school, and then high school, it just got worse. All the resources were gone.
Now, I want to ask you guys about that specifically because when you were in high school, that's when COVID hit, right?
Yes.
So, how much of the skew of hopelessness and not seeing a bright future did COVID really play a role in that?
I think the biggest thing was we had such a shift because we couldn't get out. So much time on screen time. And Carlo was talking about earlier with the endemic of shorter attention spans and scrolling through TikTok or shorts or reels or whatever it may be, that's really messed with our well-being. And that kind of, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time for me, please?
No, that's okay. No, I was just saying how, the impact of COVID, we know because we've seen many headlines for studies and things about the impact of COVID on people's mental health. I'm just wondering if you guys believe that it also affected your generation's hopeless or hopeful meter. In other words, so if it was on a continuum and you're really hopeful and you're really excited about the future, to the other end of being like, why bother? Why should I try? Because it's not going to work out anyhow, or it's going to have a bad ending. So, how much of that did COVID play a role in that? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I remember what I was gonna say. So, like he was saying on the dopamine, that those short-term fixes, we became so dependent on that because our main source of entertainment for that entire time was a screen. So now, as a residual of that, we're focused on that constant short-term dopamine loop for like joy and any sense of pleasure. And that is carried on and out and over. And you'll see people, there's a whole term for it now, doom scrolling, where people will just be on their phone. They just keep scrolling and mindlessly looking. And
Yeah.
they're not even absorbing their content, the content that they're watching.
Well, just
And
to note, the doom scrolling and the dopamine scrolling for dopamine releases,
mm,
that is cross generational. A
mm,
huge issue for everyone, no matter how old you are. I think it just impacts younger people more significantly because of where you are
mm.
in your life experiences and what's going on, what the things that you have to face, the challenges that you have to deal with, which are very different. But nonetheless, go ahead.
And especially the youth being at such an impressionable age, when that's normalized when you're growing up, think about the kids in elementary or high school, because we've already had the whole like the iPad generations starting and coming out where kids are more so raised by their devices than seemingly their parents. And if you grow up and it's normal for you and all of your peers around you to be on devices constantly as your only source of entertainment, joy, and just everything for the whole day, then you're going to learn that behavior is normal. And that's really the long term impact, because if that really sticks, and it has so far, if it sticks and that cycle continues, that's going to have a very negative impact on our ability to do things as a society and our attention spans, our overall mental health, because our sources, our outlets of where we're getting things out or what we're doing, instead of getting out, getting exercise or going around or whatever, we're looking at pixels to give us everything. And that's just not sustainable. That's not good for your mental health in any regard. And in turn, by sitting and watching a screen, it's bad for your physical health, as that's all you're doing.
Yeah. Let me switch gears and say this. I want to ask Arlo this question to start and then pitch it back to you, Isaac. But when you think about how you personally have overcome setbacks, what's down there in your resilience toolbox? What do you go to? What's your go-to for helping you make it through tough times?
I don't like to compare situations to previous situations, but sometimes I'll do that. I'll do exactly that. And to some degree, that could be unhealthy, but I feel as if comparing a situation that I'm in now to whether it's past trauma or if it's just something troublesome I had to go through, it alleviates my self-doubt. It definitely makes me feel a little more confident in whatever work I'm doing or whatever I'm doing.
I think that's fantastic. Actually, that's called perspective seeking, and that is one of the components of people who have a lot of resilience. And so you're definitely
Huh.
demonstrating that. What about you, Isaac? What's your in your resilience toolbox?
Much like Arlo said, with the whole perspective seeking, I believe you called it, that really gives you, you can look back and you can think about how far you've come from where you were at a certain point. And another thing is, it's really important to have a good, close, supportive circle of friends and family. I know, and I have a good relationship with my mom and my stepdad. My family, my at-home relationship is very good. We're all happy and just talk to each other a lot. Whenever you remove that connection, because we've seen that a lot more from being normal for families to eat all at the dinner table and talk. Now it's just all phones in different rooms and whatnot. So having that direct connection with loved ones and people who are there for you and support you has been very important to me. And I think that also applies to anyone, because when you're going through something and people who know you see that, they will recognize that. And if they are genuinely your friends and your family and they love you and care about you, they will recognize that you're in a struggling spot and they'll say, "Hey, do you need a hand? I'm here to help you out." So, remember that the people who are close to you, your loved ones, your friends, your family, you're there to help them as much as they're there to help you. So
Mhm.
that's really something the most important, keeping those strong connections with genuine people who you can always go to for advice. Because more often than not, if you're going through something, someone you know has probably gone through a similar scenario and you can get advice from them
I love
and you can
that.
get help from others. It's important to remember to ask for help from others. That's my number one way of resilience, to remember that I'm not the only one who goes through things like this. I'm not alone in the struggle, and I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm going to make it through the tunnel.
I love that. I love that. Do you want to add
Thank you.
anything, Arlo?
I think he's absolutely right. I think you couldn't do a better job by asking for help. I want to say 90% of people who don't ask for help get nowhere. And it is for someone who's never really had the help, you can always, it's a bit of a boundary to push. It's a bit of a thing to, it's a change. It's a
Mhm.
change that is necessary, but it's also hard. The long run potential of that change, though, can be absolutely beautiful. And I think you could create lasting friendships. I think you could create career progression, general content in your life. All of what Isaac said, it's all completely true.
I love that. I love all of that. So you guys give me a lot of hope about our younger generation. If you, just to close this out, I want to ask you if you had something that you could share with the older generations, what would you want them to know? What would you tell them?
Communicate. There's always going to be that level of, I don't understand the new generation, or there's going to be that level of disconnect. Communicate. Everyone has a story. Learn of the stories of people who have so much more time and experience spent, and learn about them and their life and their perspective, and get to know people, really genuinely learn people for who they are. Don't jump to conclusions. We can close that gap. We don't need that disconnect. There's so much that we can learn from previous generations, and there's some stuff that previous generations people can learn from newer generations.
Absolutely.
There's
100%.
always different
100% agree with
things.
you.
And another thing too, because I know sometimes, you know, with age can come bitterness, or different experiences can make a person's temperament more negative. But this is more so for anyone. It's always free to spread happiness and joy, and it always feels good. And when you go around and you do that, it's the snowball effect in a positive manner. When you hold the door for someone, they might pay for the next person in line's meal, and that person might, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? It just,
Yeah.
positivity spreads, and it's free to be positive and kind. And it's important, no matter what age you are, to recognize the importance of that and the impact that makes, even if it seems like a little thing, because it adds.
I love that. Arlo, we're going to give you the almost last word.
Oh boy. I think breaking down any walls for any generation of cynicalism is definitely going to make you a happier person and generally a better person.
Nice. Very cool. You guys, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. And I want to thank you for who's listening for joining us for this meaningful conversation. I hope you felt as inspired as I did listening to these two young voices, sharp, thoughtful, and already committed to making a positive impact in the world. It's a reminder that resilience isn't bound by age. It's something we build moment by moment through curiosity, courage, and connection. If today's episode resonated with you, I invite you to share it with someone who could use a little encouragement. And remember, you can always find more stories, tools, and free resources over at championsofresilience.com. Until next time, keep rising, keep rebuilding, and keep shining your light. I'm Amy Gamble, and this is Champions of Resilience.